When I graduated high school, I moved to Gary, Indiana to stay with an uncle while I decided whether or not to go to college. I was working in my uncle's landscaping business. We worked in the wealthy suburbs of Chicago lifting heavy stones and all the hard stuff. I wish I was just mowing lawns. Lol. That's besides the point. One day heading back to Gary from East Chicago, I stopped at a gas station to get something to drink and top off the gas in my uncle's truck. While filling up the tank, this random dude just walks up to me and doesn't ask. He demands $5. I was worn out, tired and wasn't up for dealing with scum like this asshole. So I rudely told him to fuck off and bother someone else. At that point he turned to walk away talking to himself, upset at the fact I not only denied his demand, but insulted his crusty ass on top of it. I turned my back long enough to take the nozzle out of the tank and screw the cap back on, when this crazy fucker comes from behind me and stabs me in the back. I'm trying my best to fight him off, and he keeps landing stabs. Luckily for me, an off-duty officer came to my side and grabbed him off of me and disarmed him and held him on the ground as some helpful gang members came to help us. Yes, real gang members came to help our off-duty cop subdue a crazy ass mffer. Him slumped over the truck at this point, bleeding everywhere. I was stabbed 3 times in my back, around my shoulders, and once in my neck. An ambulance was called. I ended up in the ER and got stitched up. If he would have moved a couple inches to the right, I would have been done for. If that cop never came to my rescue, I would most likely be dead. After that summer I ended up going to Valparaiso and went after my degree. I never felt more lucky to be alive. Woke up one night around midnight. Guy was standing over my bed. He spent the next 8 hours torturing, beating, and strangling me. He then made me undress and told me he was going to rape me, but he wanted to hold a knife against my throat while he did it. I bought time by telling him I had to pee and throw up, which I really did have to. When you're strangled you lose control of your bodily functions. I told him I wouldn't struggle if he let me pee and throw up before he raped me. While hunched over the toilet, completely nude, he looked at me all of a sudden and said, "I'm going to stop hurting you now." Told me to get in my bed and force me to take some Valium as he didn't want me neighbors to hear my crying. I passed out from the drugs and probably a combination of 1,000 other things. I woke up 2 hours later. Told him that my boss would call the police if I didn't show up to work, so I needed to go. Surprisingly he let me go. I drove to the police department first thing and filed charges. He was charged with first-degree felony criminal burglary, 2 third-degree felony assaults, a count of misdemeanor unlawful restraint, and 1 count of criminal negligence because he destroyed my phone, so I wouldn't be able to call the police during everything. He ended up getting 9 months probation because he was a first-time offender, veteran, and a drug user. I suspect he stopped hurting me as he was sobering up. I, however, was sentenced to a lifetime of emotional and physical pain on top of anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Crazy how the justice system neglects victims sometimes. By the way, the guy was someone I dated and broke up with 3 months prior to this. No, he didn't have a key. First time, met a guy at a bar who fell in love with the guy I was sharing a room with. He was cool and his sister was cute. Went to his place to hang out with the sister and he was gone. Their neighbor pulled me aside and said she saw him leave with a knife and mentioned my roommate. I ran back to see him outside our building with the knife. Luckily, we were literally moving out that day, so we just stayed inside until we could return keys and such and then bounced. Second time, shot at by fake police after a kidnapping gone wrong. Third time, gambling in pool and the player I was backing lost. I didn't want to back him for a rematch. Friend came and pulled a gun on me. Girl who worked at the pool hall took his gun from him. Edit. Not sure if it counts, but fourth time, guy tried to kill me by praying to a blood moon because I wouldn't listen to him talk about guns while I was working. I was 13 years old during war in Bosnia. My friend came out of building with some empty bottles. He wanted to get some water. I told him that I will come and help. We had hand water pump near. Some young boy, 7 years old, jumped and told us he wants to pump. I'll let him do that. My friend bent over to wash bottles, and I started to drink water. I wasn't thirsty, but I know I must drink. I remember that moment when I felt water in my mouth and something kicked me hard. I turned my head and I saw another boy's head exploding all over me. I screamed and I ran away. That was 120mm mortar shell. 13 people, civilians, died. My friend and I were only wounded because we were bent over. Boy who wanted to help us died within next few hours from injuries. Not me, but a former colleague, FC. When he was in his mid-20s, he's probably around 55 today, he was attacked by a total stranger with a knife while using the restroom in a hotel lobby. And this was no Fleabag hotel either. It was a nice place, like a Hilton or something similar. Anyway, the attacker stabbed FC in the side without warning. FC crumbled to the ground and rolled into his back, just in time to see the attacker lunging downwards to stab him again. He was going for FC's chest, but at the last possible moment FC grabbed the blade with his bare hands. FC held him off long enough for the attacker to flee. I guess he thought if the attack went on for too long he was risking getting caught in the act. Last time I spoke with FC was about 5 years ago, and the attacker was still in prison at that time. FC still has scars from the attack. The ones on his hands are pretty shocking. I wouldn't call it attempted murder, but when I was 14 or so I managed to get a girlfriend through a friend of mine. That friend then invited me over for a sleepover. We played Xbox for an hour or so, made pancakes and then headed to bed. He then started talking about my girlfriend at the time and how he was really jealous, which made me uncomfortable. I made up some lie saying I felt sick and wanted to go home, and he ended up pulling out an incredibly sharp 3-pronged fork and ramming it to the left half my chest twice. I ran to the shopping center, 20 minutes or so walking distance away from his house, and called my mum. She asked me what had happened. I explained the story and I ended up being taken to hospital in blood-stained pajamas. On the plus side, I only had to get 4 stitches, and that friend now can no longer stand within 10 feet of me. My friend had made a decision to get out of her abusive relationship. She had finally, after several times of saying I'm done, but struggling with feeling bad for leaving, she finally made the decision to get this person out of her life. The day before the incident he called her needing help and came over to her place after having gotten beaten up by some folks. Later we find out it was after attempting to steal a gun. This was the last straw. She tells him she's done and he loses it, throws a fit and destroys her apartment. She calls the police and makes him leave. He's driving around the neighborhood and the police catch him driving recklessly and they're arrested for that and possession. Unfortunately, he bonds out the next day. She and I are hanging out this next day. He texts wanting to talk, wanting to get his things, which there was not much of, and she had said she would leave at his parents'. She agrees to talk out in public and said that only if I were there. We talk early evening. He's apologetic / remorseful for his behavior, says he wants a civil standoff to get his things. He realizes things are over. We had plans that day, so we go out. While driving to our thing, she calls the officer who handled the previous incident and leaves him a message about looking into pressing charges on the domestic incident. We get to our destination and we see he's in the parking lot of where we are going, crying. She goes to talk to him and he's distraught, sad that this relationship is ending. But she said it's over. I'm observing the conversation from a safe distance to make sure she's okay. We go to the event we had planned to. While there she misses a call from the officer. We get done with our plans out and head home. This whole time neither of us suspect he's coming back. He had shown remorse and no sign really of hostility in our interactions with him. My friend asks me to stay the night cause she's still a little shook from the day before. I oblige. He's texting her this whole time. From what she told me, he was sad and just trying to understand that their relationship is over. He keeps saying he wants the police to set up a civil standoff to get his things. At the end of the night he says he had been calling the police a bunch and they were concerned. According to my friend, he said they might be coming over to check on everything. So we were expecting the police to potentially show up. It was late though, and we decided to try to go to sleep. We hear a knock on the door. Foolishly we both think it's the authorities. She goes to answer the door and it's him. He busts through and asks if I'm there, rushes through, finds me. It's dark, so once I realize it's him, I think he's just come to beat me up. He starts swinging and I put my hands up to defend myself. He knocks me to the ground and continues swinging. I think he's just punching me until he pulls me up onto the bed and hits my back. I feel a jolt go down my back and through my arm. He had stabbed me a few inches below the base of my neck. I'm left there on my stomach in shock. In the next room my friend is yelling, pleading with him. He heads towards her and I can hear the struggle. He's much taller than her, so she can't put up much of a fight. At this point I can hear gurgling every time I breath. I'm still on my stomach, but realize I need to roll over and try to apply pressure to the stab wound. I roll off the bed and against a wall with a windowsill. I prop myself up against it. I can now kinda see in the next room my friend trying to escape her attacker. He grabs her and pulls her out of eyesight. I grab my phone that was fortunately near me charging and dial 911. But I'm unable to speak. Maybe out of fear. I leave the phone call on, but try to keep the phone from being seen. I hear the struggle continue in the next room. The last thing I hear, you were the love of my life. I hear her pleading, saying no. There was so much said in that simple no. After a few seconds there is silence. I don't hear anything. He runs into the room I'm in, finds my phone, steals it, and leaves. At this point I'm not very coherent, still in shock, groaning in pain. It's silent now. In this moment I had never felt more truly alone. Left in a bloody mess in the middle of the night. The thought crossed my mind, I'm going to die tonight. This is the moment I die. I had been through a ring of the previous 3 years. My mom died. I was let go from my career job due to financial issues that I had no control of. And the third year my wife after 10 years had left me for someone else. This friend I made, who now lay lifeless in the living room of her apartment, had been my source of light. We were helping each other get out of our hard times. We were each other's support system. We loved each other dearly. I didn't want to be on this planet until she showed up in my life and had begun to help me see that things were going to get better. She helped me begin to write and perform music. She helped me want to get my crap together, and now she's gone. I sit against the wall of this bedroom, and then there's a shift in my brain from I'm going to die to this can't be how I die. I begin yelling for help, screaming. I'm also yelling my friend's name to make sure she's okay. It's the middle of the night, but it's possible someone might find us. A neighbor comes in and starts turning on the lights and finds us, says they've called 911. I go to point somewhere with my right hand and see it's barely hanging on by a thread. He had completely severed all 5 flexor tendons. I pull my wrist close to my body and try to keep the wound closed. The EMS and police finally show up and begin working on me. I gain this strange awareness and being to tell the police the make and model of our attacker's car. I had even remembered some of the plate number. I had lost a lot of blood though. I'm losing it. I almost pass out. The EMT looks at me and says, look, you're going to die here if you don't help me. I know you're in pain, but we can't get you out of this room unless you stand up and get in this chair. I need you to be strong, suck it up, and stand for me, or you will die. I, with their help, stand to my feet. They finally get me into a chair gurney to get me down the stairs to the ambulance. As they're rolling me out the apartment, I see them covering my friend. It was at this point the reality set in that the light of my life is gone. Once in the ambulance, in order to stay sane, I ask who had seen the most recent Avengers film, pray, and try to get as many people's names as possible. Once in the doctor tells me, okay, we are going to make an incision in your side and I'm going to shove a tube in between your rib cage. They do just that, and it was excruciating. They put me under to close the back wound. I end up in the hospital for 10 days under John Doe as a safety precaution. The guy was still out there for a day or so. Unfortunately they caught him trying to leave the state. The tube was in my chest the entire time. I had 2 surgeries on my hand timing out to be about 18 hours to repair nerves and tendons. The only emergency number 1 could think of was my ex-wife's. She received the call I had been attacked and subsequently had to inform all our friends and family. The morning after the attack the first person I see is my ex. I had not talked to her in months, but something like this supersedes whatever drama we had experienced before. My friends who I had pushed away out of grief all showed up over those 10 days. My biological mother flew in and spent those 10 days with me. I met my late friend's parents and cried with them over the loss of their daughter. Many people once they heard I was in the hospital thought I had tried to take my own life, which would have made sense with how low I was. But after this experience, I knew I couldn't do that. Every person I talked to, I told them I used to want to not be here but not anymore. I have to live because my friend doesn't get to anymore. I owed her that. The last thing I'll share, the night everything happened maybe 30 minutes before, I looked at my friend and I said that I was so grateful for her presence in my life. I was grateful she had changed my world and I was so glad to know her. I told her how strong she was, how amazing she was, how beautiful she was. I told her I loved her and she said she loved me too. I think back to that moment a lot. How incredibly fortunate I am that I got to tell her those things. As if the universe/divine was letting me say my piece with her. Letting me say goodbye. I got to tell her everything I would have wanted her to know if we never saw each other again. I hate that she's gone, but I'm grateful to have had that moment. TL. Doctor, I was stabbed in the back and had my right wrist sliced so bad I lost full use of it. After I was attacked I listened to my friend get killed in the room next to me. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more daily 6 PM Reddit uploads.